What's up? It's your boy GimpZilla coming at you with another gaming strategy video. This week, I am going to be looking at Dead in Thay from Tales of the Yawning Portal. There's a small twist on this one. I'm going into this module completely blind. I thought I would give you guys some tips and tricks on how to approach a fresh module. There's so much feedback that I read online and just from players' experience personally, where people feel intimidated by modules. They feel like, where do I start with them? How do I really make them, pop and get the results that I want to? This is going to be my tips and tricks on what I would do when I'm freshly approaching a module like this, and hopefully we can get some insight out of this. So sit tight and let's dive right in. Now, the very first thing that I would do on any module is the synopsis, right? You need to understand at least in very rough terms what's the bigger picture of the module. Now, 5e has done a good job with a lot of their books compared to older editions, where they do give you a nice little clear synopsis at the front end of the module, so you can know a little bit better about what you're getting into at the start. Older modules are a little bit more difficult. They kind of just present you the rooms and you're expected to kind of extract the story out of it. But with the 5e Dead and Thay, let's go ahead and hit the adventure introduction and see what it's all about. So just out the gate, I mean, I personally like the story. It sounds like your player characters are essentially raiding the Doom Vault and attempting to take out a series of Lich phylacteries and trying to put an ultimate rest to Sazis Tam and his Lich armies. So, perfect. Also in the synopsis, what we're going to pick up is the character's goals, which I thought was a good addition here. Essentially, it's telling you the story right out front. Your characters are going to be exploring the Doom Vault, dealing as much damage as possible, and then they're trying to destroy the phylacteries within. It also mentions here that the villain's goals are straightforward: defend the Doom Vault, but that all foes are not necessarily hostile, so there's opportunities for enemies to turn into allies. So throughout the module, essentially what I'll be looking for are the additional factions that the players can befriend, and I'm also going to be looking into as much Lich lore as possible, and where the Liches are going to be hiding. Now, the next thing I would be doing after I read the adventure synopsis and have a good idea of kind of where that's coming from, um, you know, each module is a personal experience for the dungeon master, right? I'd be hard pressed to say that when you run a module, you have to run it word for word when they walk in the room, read this description, and then they're going to fight, 8 skeletons here and 9 skeletons in this room and 6 goblins here. And I think that's what turns a lot of people away from these modules, is they feel like, maybe I don't want to run these skeletons, or maybe I don't want to run, X, Y, and Z. The module needs to speak to you. You need to be inspired to run this thing. If it's ever going to have the flavor and the feel that you really want to come out of it. So, what that means to me here, I'm looking at the cover art for Dead and Thay, and my immediate reaction is like, who is this guy? Who's this like creepy skeleton with the fire staff? And then this character over on the left got his hands crossed. He's balding. He's got some kind of like Harry Potter tattoo on his forehead. Those might be some of the first things that I look into is just who are these characters. If it catches your attention, then by all means dig a little bit deeper, try and figure out exactly who they are, where they fit in the story, and again, if it interests you, then you're going to be more excited to present it to your players. You're going to have the better emotion behind the character itself, and that's going to help your player characters kind of feel that same hype or same emotion that you're feeling. So, but these two characters are like, that's immediately where my attention is drawn to. So, again, you don't have to read these modules in order, right? Like just sitting down and reading like 15, 20 pages, which I'm sure it is in the physical copy, or in my case, I mean, I'm looking over here and I see Geez, like 10 different levels and 10 different maps. I'm not going to go in order and read every single one in a line, right? I'm going to get bored with that. I'm probably going to, my eyes are going to gloss over certain sections. I'm not going to retain the information that I want to. So I suggest that you go directly to where your attention is drawn to. When my attention is drawn to these two characters, first thing I'm going to go do is let's figure out who they are and let's see if the book provides any additional background information for these characters to help me, again, really, really immerse myself within this world. So, Roll20 gives me a little bit of a cheat with that in the fact that it does separate all these guys. And unfortunately, I don't have a hard copy of Tales of the Yawning Portal in front of me, so I can't really explain how it's presented in the book. So Amenocles is a rebel wizard who helped assault the Bloodgate. He was captured during the assault and brainwashed. Okay. So again, my brain's already going a little bit with how can I make this character come to life? How can I do that? And that's before I even know where he's at in the dungeon, or when the characters are going to interact with this guy at all. The story will come together as you understand all the little parts, and the better you understand these little parts, the easier it's going to be when you're reading through each room to decide, hey, this is where I should play this guy, this is how I should play this guy. These are some hints that might come up. So the other character that immediately caught my eye is Tarul Var. If Var is brought to the brink of death, he might bargain for a chance to escape the dungeon. At this point, again, we're still very early in the process, but what have we picked up here? We've picked up that there is a Doom Vault full of Lich phylacteries, and the other thing that we've picked up is that the NPCs in here are able to be negotiated with, and then as those plot points come out, my brain's already programmed to essentially be looking for these things, and I'm sure I'm going to get more information as we go throughout the module here. So, and now at this crossroad, like, we've probably done enough reading to throw your players in there. And some of you might be looking at me like, whoa, I don't know anything that's going on quite yet. Like, I don't really know anything. This is presented as a 9th level module. You're probably not starting here, right? So, I've already picked up enough information that I could decide whether or not I want to implement this into my game. And I also have enough information that I could probably start foreshadowing some of these events in prior modules or prior adventures before running Dead and Thay. And all I did was read essentially the first page of the module and the last page of the module. So I have the big picture, and from there, we can move forward into some of the nitty gritty at that point. What's next? Like, where do I go next? I'm still, Gimp, I'm still completely bogged down by this huge list of rooms, and look at the NPC charts in the back of the book. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of NPCs. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do this. My next step is almost exactly what I did previously, right? We looked at the cover art. We said, this guy's interesting. This guy's interesting. Let me get a little more information about him. So the next thing I would personally do is I would go to the maps themselves, and I would look for essentially the most interesting looking room, right? You have these series of maps in front of you. Let's just go ahead, twirl our fingers, land it on the map somewhere, say this room looks cool, it has cool dimensions, and dive deeper. The room that caught my attention here, it appears to be the Phylactery Vault. It was 4 triangle rooms that don't appear to be connected by any kind of hallways. So I'm kind of thinking that this is probably going to be a cool encounter. There might be some like teleportation pads, or something like that. Again, my mind is engaged right now. I'm interested and eager to go ahead and read how this room interacts, what's going to happen here, and again, my big advice here is go where your interest lies. Read about what interests you. As you kind of read, one room here, one room here, maybe you take a day or two between each room. But as you kind of read these rooms, and again, as long as you're interested and engaged with the content as you're reading it, your brain's going to pick it up. We're all smart people, especially the D&D community. I mean, we're articulate, we're well written, well spoken. we can retain this information. I have full confidence that you have the ability to retain it. And then as you kind of fill in the gaps, you say, okay, now I know how to run the phylactery vault. What's another room that interests me? And as you kind of piece together these rooms, you'll get the bigger picture. To take it kind of one step further, right? Again, emphasizing to read the rooms that catch your attention first. You know, I'm not even saying that I'm going to run Den Thay at this point, right? Like, for all I know, I could read the phylactery vault here and think that that's the coolest encounter ever, and then just take that into a homebrew situation and apply it where I want. So there's benefits to doing this out of order, and doing it based on your attention span, because you might pick up one or two rooms. You might never run the module itself, but hey, I got a good puzzle out of this. I got a good storyline out of this. If you find a part boring, shut it down, skip it, try something else. Experiment a little bit, and just read a couple random rooms and see really what's going to catch your attention. So let's dive into the phylactery vault and let's see what the module itself has to say about it. Okay, wow. So this is a really cool room. After reading the phylactery vault here, this is essentially a pyramid. These four triangles are connected, and then each triangle has its own gravity, and players can essentially walk like in a full 360 up onto the ceiling and down and around. It was also riddled with cool information about attacks between each floor. Like I said, you can walk 360, and then it also mentioned a demi-lich that's going to be summoned at some point in this vault. Furthermore, what did I pick up by just reading this one room? It hinted at these glyph keys, so I know that as I'm reading other parts of the adventure at this point, I need to keep an eye out for these glyph keys because they seem quite important in dismantling this phylactery. The other thing that I picked up from just the very beginning of this, once the characters disrupt 6 black gates throughout the dungeon. Now, moving forward, as I continue to progress and I continue to look through room by room, I know definitively what I need to pay attention to and what information I'm going to want to present to my players. And all of this is just kind of critically running in my head as I kind of skim through other sections of the dungeon and start looking for tips and hints on how I can kind of tell this story. So where would I be going from this point forward? I would probably start planning out some sessions, right? My next step would be to move into the nitty gritty, and start trying to understand kind of how this all works together. I would be looking at the dungeon entrance. I try and figure out kind of where is the starting point for this module, where the player is going to come in at, and then from that point I'm going to again continue to pick and choose specific rooms that catch my attention, so that I can play that up. So what I would be doing personally in this situation is I would probably be mapping out an area here. Let's go ahead and draw a square on it. A standard session with your players is somewhere in the ballpark of about 3 to 4 hours. That's going to enable roughly about 3 to 4 combat encounters. A little bit of planning, a little bit of critical thinking of, what is the most likely path for my players to take. Again, we're starting at the entry point, and I'm looking at an area that's something like this without even reading any of these rooms, just kind of doing enough dungeon mastering in the past. I could probably extend these like 7-8 rooms to last a 3 to 4 hour session. Again, zoom in on a couple of these points. What are the rooms that are catching my attention? What are the rooms that I kind of want to push my players into and discovering? And that'll tell me like what I need to prepare for. So let's end it with just looking at a couple encounters within this dome, that'll help us kind of unravel, possibly what the first session might look like. All right, cool. So what did we pick up from just reading a certain section? So I learned a lot about how this dungeon operates. This appears to be like a vampire section, with the vampire residing down here in room 3, and he oversees like a series of arena fights here in room 2. The vampire himself holds a glyph key hint, hint, nudge, nudge, right? Again, we've read in the prior sections that these glyph keys are going to be important. What I also noticed is that repeatedly in these sections, it kept mentioning these like white gates, white gates, white gates. So I did a little bit of further research on essentially what these white gates are. Between each section, you can kind of see it down here on the map. There's a small little like white glyph. And these glyphs essentially prevent the players from progressing outside of that domain until they deal with the threat within. So what that tells me is that I can now spend my effort and focus on this vampire encounter because I know that I can just stonewall players saying, hey, you can't get through that. It looks like you need some kind of key, looks like you need some kind of device. There's not going to be an opportunity for players to go too far off the rails for me. So again, what is that doing for me as the dungeon master? It's focusing my preparation so that I don't necessarily expend resources that are a waste to me. I also did a little bit of reading just beyond that, again, to understand kind of what's in my greater box area here, right? Again, I'm trying to plan for a full session. I'm planning for 3 to 4 encounters and probably a half dozen rooms. So I understand that, again, just in the broadest strokes possible, you have a friendly succubus over here in room 5. I learned a fun interaction in number 7. Looks like it's going to be an elemental portal. So if people are to step inside that rift, they're going to get teleported instantly to a different elemental realm. And then the other thing that I did some research on was if they decide to go south here, each section kind of has a ruler or a leader of that section, and each leader is going to have a glyph key. So basically, my session 1 is they're going to come in, they're going to deal with the vampire, they're going to get this key. They're either going to go, out to the west over here and interact with like the friendly succubus, and then she'll provide a little bit of more information, or they're going to go south here and they're going to be dealing with the aquatic domain. There's a kraken here in room 74, and then the master of this pools of devotion area is a naga up here in room 76 that players are going to have to face to get the key from this section as well. So really, what am I doing for my first session's prep? I'm probably preparing, an interaction with the succubus. How can I make her friendly? How can I, get her in the party and willing to work with the party and provide this information? I'm preparing a vampire encounter as well with some role play because, again, the book mentions in multiple spots that this person's willing to speak and negotiate with the party and even, offer this glyph for trade under the right circumstances. And then I'm probably doing a little bit of prep on my naga as well. Basically, all of these keys, all these key holders that I mentioned and we've read in the back part of the module here, these key holders are going to be vital encounters. So anytime I read this module, I'm going to be looking for key holders in each specific zone, and I really want to make sure as the dungeon master to tell my story, I want those key holders to be, dramatic. I want those fights to be intense. I'll kind of finish with this in this section is, notice all the secret doors, right? These are just tools for the dungeon master to, railroad's the wrong word, right? Because railroading is so negatively depicted in D&D. Like nobody wants to feel railroaded. No one really even wants to say the word railroad. They want the open world experience for their players. But it's really vital for you as the dungeon master to have an idea of how your players are going to progress, right? It's very difficult if your players are entering a room that you've never read about before, and you have no idea what's there. You're absolutely going to miss out on some of the intricacies. So, having a plan and kind of forcing your characters into a specific direction is not a bad thing. So let's just take for the example that like I fleshed out my vampire and I fleshed out my naga 100%, and I have basically like this whole western corridor mapped out in my mind, and that's the way I want to go. The reality is like you don't need to read rooms 13, 12, 14. Like you don't need to read any of that because there's a secret door right here, and you as the dungeon master can basically just say, you didn't find any secret doors. Like, you didn't find the route here. Even on like a 20 perception check, you control the dungeon, you control the pace. If you did all of your prep for the western end, then just do not reveal those secret doors. Basically, to sum up the kind of the each individual session prep, get one or two encounters that are through the roof, guys. Like, make sure that you have specific encounters that are either going to get the adrenaline going within the characters, or get their brain really working on some cool like little lore nuggets, and deliver on those two or three encounters. At this point moving forward, after reading the Abyssal Prison, after reading about how these glyphs work, after reading about how these white doors work, and how these black doors work, which essentially are teleportation runes to different sections of the dungeon. Now that I know that it's kind of this big inner web of teleportation circles, now I can go back out to like a macro view, and again just kind of zoom in on some specific sections that I like. So me personally, like this forest of death is kind of catching my attention. So that would probably be one of the next sections that I personally read. And again, as the dungeon master using these teleportation runes, I can pretty much get my players over there, just by limiting kind of what opens up when a portal's available, right? So again, just because the module tells you that you have 6 or 7 teleportation runes that lead to 6 or 7 different spots of the dungeon, like, do not get overwhelmed. Do not, again, feel like you have to read this entire module before. Just say, hey, look, there's only 2 runes that are active. It looks like there's a teleportation rune to the Forest of Death, and then there's a teleportation rune to the Abyssal Prisons. And you can basically have your characters from that point, pick or choose, because you've planned 1 or 2 adventures for them on a 3-hour session. And it's going to present that sandbox feel while also giving you a controlled environment that you can map out these encounters for, and you can kind of do the proper planning to make each one of these alive. And then next week when they come in and they say, okay, I'm going to walk through the black gate and I'm going to go through it, and it's like, okay, well, now you ended up right over here, right where I wanted you. And the magic of DMing, and the magic of that DM screen, is that the players literally would be none the wiser. I don't think you're hurting anybody by taking their options from 6 or 7 portals down to 2, and delivering really good encounters on the 2 that you prepare. Take those tools. At this point, let's just do like one final recap, and I'm gonna send you guys on your way, and we'll go from there. All right, so at that point, let's go ahead and recap the best ways on how to read a module, right? It always starts with the synopsis. You need to figure out, just kind of reading the storyline, is this even going to work for my campaign? Do I even want to run this? Ask yourself that question early. Ask yourself that question often. Up next, read the ending. Understand the full story in broad strokes. If you understand where the module is heading, it's going to help as you read each individual rooms on what's going to be important for you to highlight, what storylines you want to deliver on, and what encounters you feel are worth it or possibly thrown to the wayside. Read what's interesting to you. Don't feel like you have to read the entire module before you run this. Stay engaged. Pick rooms that look cool to you. Flip through the book, find some pictures that inspire you, and then read the material that is interesting and catches your attention. Remember, if it's boring to you, it's probably boring to your players as well. And finally, session prep, guys. Remember, break your reading up into smaller parts. Nobody is telling you you have to read the entire module and have everything laid out in front of you. You're looking at 3 to 4 encounters for a 3 to 4 hour session, and you really want those 3 to 4 encounters to shine. You want those encounters to highlight, specific events. You'll be able to fill in the gaps as needed. If a section is highlighting, white gates, glyphs, all these things that we've been talking about, go ahead and just read as needed, get the information as needed, and deliver it to the players. Railroad with good intentions, guys. I'm not here to say that you have to force players through doors and you have to force them to do this specific interaction at this specific point. But again, strongly prepare the material that you think is vital, and of course there's always going to be time for filler from the player characters. That's just bound to happen. So I really hope that the video helped you out. This was like a really broad perspective and a broad look on how to read a module. Make sure you do like the video and you subscribe for more D&D content. I expect to continue my DM Tactics series, which will most likely include a Dead and Thay run through. And then as of right now, I'm running against the Giants, so that's probably going to be my next DM Tactics video. So again, I appreciate you hanging out. I appreciate all my new subscribers that I've been seeing recently from the D&D community. So I'm happy that I can make some content that people are enjoying and feel like it's an actual contribution. So as always, guys, this is going to be Gimpzilla out.